So as I call your district number, if you just say your name, uh, District 1,
It's Stribling.
District 2,
Connor Kinman.
District 3,
Grant Jones.
4 is Brian Ellis, and Brian is not here yet. District 5,
Ryan McAllister. I'm proxy for Patrick Brady.
thanks for being here, Ryan. District 6,
Austin Brawley.
District 7,
Michael Stone.
District 8,
Jenny Hipple.
District 9,
Pauletta Smith.
District 10 is Curtis, District 11,
Jason Bowles.
and District 12 is Corey, and he's not here. All right. So we're in the books and we're official. Okay. Thanks for being here. The next item on the agenda is approval of today's agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Beth Stribling. We have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
I think I heard Pauletta pipe in there next.
Yay.
Okay. All right. Any opposed? Hearing none. The agenda is approved. I don't know if I did this backwards or not. I wasn't even looking at the list today. And now, do we have a motion? Hope you've had a chance to look over the minutes from last meeting in January. And if you feel like you have had enough time to check that out, it was a pretty short meeting anyway. The floor is open for a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Michael Stone, you have a second?
I'll second.
Beth seconds. Those opposed to accepting the minutes from January? Hearing none, they are accepted. Okay. What's next here? Okay, reports. I really do not have a report today. I do want to take just a moment, and I know it's not really, in some ways it's marching band related, but I know last week was our in-service conference. I just want to send a shout out to Dr. Strobe and Melissa and the KMEA office and Joe Craig and the executive committee and all those that were involved in making the in-service conference a reality last week. I know there was a lot of preparation, a lot of hard work before and during the conference. And I know it wasn't the perfect ideal situation for us, but all things considered, we made the best. They made the best of a bad situation. So thank you all very, very much for your work in that. I know that it's been handy for me as teaching at the college and having music ed students. I was talking with John about this the other day, that because the clinics sessions were recorded, I've been able to share some of those sessions with my college students that are going to be music education majors. So it's been very handy in that regard. But again, thank you all very much for all your work on that. And if I've left somebody out, I apologize, but just wanted to send my thanks your way. That's really all I have. And so it should be not too long a meeting today, I'm thinking. We'll see. George, are you here? Do you have any more to add from the marching band evaluator coordinator's position?
No, John and I are working on securing the judges. I'd say we're about 2/3 done with that. So the response has been good. Everybody's anxious to hopefully get the event back on the calendar. So that's what I have for today.
Right. Thank you. All right. And Dr. Strobe, do you have something to report?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I haven't seen it myself, but I understand that David Starnes' presentation was really good. I mean, really good. So it is recorded, and what I've been doing, what I'm going to be doing today, between all my, I got 3 meetings today, but between all my meetings, I'm going to be continuing the process of installing the recordings back into the feed loop platform, So basically, you go back and just go to that session like you would have, and there it is, a recording of it. And I haven't gotten to David's yet, but I look forward to the opportunity to listen to that. I think it sounds like it was pretty epic. There are two universities in the state that have of the three that we like to consider for state championships. There are two that have an away game on the 30th of October, and that is Kentucky and Louisville. So we were supposed to go to Kentucky last year, of course, and everything came to a crash. So we're fairly recent, since the conference, I was able to turn my attention to some other things, including this. And I wrote an email to the group of people at the University of Kentucky that were in on the conversation last spring, including George and Cody Birdwell. And I got that off to them, and I got a response from a deputy athletic director with some of his, I don't know, concerns and misgivings and all this kind of thing. But it's just a step in the process. And I spoke with Cody on the phone yesterday, and we talked about 2 or 3 things, including this. And he's, he really wants it there. Of course, George really wants it there. All the university really want it there, except for probably the 2 or 3 people that have to work without extra pay to make it happen. It is kind of funny how that setup is, but it by all likelihood it'll be at University of Kentucky on the 31st. That means that because I've got 2 places that could do it, I can feel relatively confident that it will be on the 31st, and that quarterfinals will be the week prior. So one of my next little processes to do is to put together the application for hosting the quarterfinals around the state, and then also start recruiting and talking to and asking people around Lexington to start considering hosting the semifinals. That is difficult, to find a place to host the 1As and the 2As can be pretty challenging. Because none of the 1As or 2As have a stadium big enough for quarterfinals, for semifinals. So that, it's not easy. When KMEA went to the 5 classes, it almost doubled the difficulty of getting enough sites. It's a whole lot harder to get 5 than it is to get 4. So that's just one of the issues that we face. I am like Tim, is that the way the numbers are going with the positivity rate and with the number of infections and the effectiveness of the vaccines and the pace at which the vaccines are getting into arms is making me feel pretty confident that by the beginning of the year, we'll feel like it's almost normal. And then by October, I think we'll all feel pretty safe. And I imagine we'll be able to sell tickets with you sitting next to just about anybody, and it'll be okay. I hope so, because that's the way that more people can have a good seat to see the band. If we have to spread out more than that, it won't be as appealing. But that we'll cross that bridge when it comes time to start selling tickets. That's about it. You're muted, Tim.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Strobe. We really just have one bit of unfinished business, and I think it's more of a formality more than anything, but to make it official, according to our agenda today, as you know, we at our last meeting moved that we eliminate the requirement that bands participate in the district level concert assessment in order to participate in the state marching band championships. I think it was pretty unanimous to put that forward this spring. And so we're up for a second reading now. You can see that in your agenda. And we don't need a motion since it's a second reading, as I understand, and so we can discuss this further. Is there anybody that would like to discuss this second reading any further? Okay. So we don't need a motion, right, John? We can just go right ahead and
Correct.
take a vote.
Just take a vote.
Okay. I guess to make it official, we probably should go down the districts here. So if you would just register just say yes if you're in favor of it, no if you're not. District 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
8,
Yes.
9,
Yes.
10, 11,
Yes.
12.
Yes.
Oh, welcome. All right. So motion passes. So, and John, I have a question here. Is there a band committee meeting right after this? Is there one today?
There is, what time we got that, Joe? At 1? Is that right? There is, and this is about the only business they're going to have. I don't anticipate there being anything, significant there. If you want to, but if you would like to come, I need to get you that link. I didn't even think about it, honestly.
Well, that's quite all right. My grandson's here, so I'm totally okay with passing along the information to Joe, and he can pass it along to the committee.
I think Joe can carry this one without much support.
Okay. All right. So that passed. All right. So really, we're ready to move on to new business. You know that we had a task force that was formed, and back in early January, it met and we discussed different plans, contingency plans, if things did not work out like as normal. And there was a plan A, which is normal. The worst case scenario was a plan C, if travel was not available or venues were maybe not available, but to provide some kind of culminating event, more than likely would be virtual or recorded fashion. And then the plan B would be somewhere in the middle where you have bands are able to travel, but not long distances, maybe just short distances. And the idea that you could have an in-person culminating event. And to do so, we talked about the idea of in the plan B scenario to use the culminating event as the regionals, where all 5 classes would be represented at 5 different sites conveniently placed around the state, and then have a prelims or a classification prelims that morning, and then have an open class finals in the evening. So those are our 3 plans that we talked about. And I really don't, our task force has not met again since that time. And I thought it might just be a good idea today if we wanted to discuss that even further, if anybody has thought about it anymore and maybe has some possible suggestions that they might like to give their 2 cents worth on how, particularly a plan B. I feel confident enough that we won't have to deal with the plan C. That doesn't mean we don't need to plan for it, but and again, that's why we're doing this, is in the worst case scenario, what could we do? We want to have something for our students and for our band directors. But I thought it might be a good idea to maybe talk a little bit further about plan B. The idea of if we had limited traveling. Let's suppose things are better, but administration say, we want you to stay within an hour's drive if you're going to be traveling, or maybe that you can't stay in hotels. We just don't know that. For the might spend the night. So with that being said, I'll throw this out there to maybe get the ball rolling. What about, and we didn't really talk about the specifics on this, but if we went through plan B, I guess one of the steps we need to take is to secure sites. Should we go ahead and start to look at a a scenario where sites might be available for that. I guess it would be the 23rd of October. Is that something we want to discuss right now, or would somebody else like to offer something else?
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
So for Plan B, thinking of current climate across the state, many districts are at different levels of in-school, virtual, and so on. At what level would the committee consider going to Plan B, depending on what the decisions are at the local level and how different they are? One district may say you can only travel an hour. It might be 1 out of 10 districts through the state that say that. It might be half the districts. What if Jefferson County and Fayette County said you can only travel an hour, but no other districts did? So there might be something to consider, at what point does the committee decide, okay, time to go to Plan B? That's a difficult question. That's just something to ponder, think about, because we don't know that yet. It's what we've been dealing with in COVID is things we don't know, and trying to plan for that. But something to consider. It may not be across the state 100%. All districts decided this. There's going to be different decisions made in different locations. So it's going to be a tough one to struggle with.
It is. And I think back to this past season, and it was all the way up until almost August before we made a final decision. I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I think it's a great question, David. And would anybody else like to offer their opinion on that?
Last year, we did a pretty solid survey of the band directors across the state and asked them what to do, and they'd been privy to these discussions. And we got word from them. It was not unanimous. It was about 2-1. About two-thirds said call the whole thing off, and about 1/3 said no, not yet. And that's a solid majority, and that informed the committee. And the committee, maybe not so much a coincidence, was also 2-1. It was 8-4 as to what we should do at that time. But that could be, if we face the difficulties that the differences that David describes, it might come down to something again like that. Just thinking.
So that leads me then back to what Tim was saying. Should we consider Plan B right now? I would tend to say, yeah, I think so. Plan for Plan A, have sites, be ready for that, but also plan for Plan B, because if it is going to come down until August or September before that, then it'll be even harder. Maybe then if we just dealing with schedules, for some people it's a little bit easier to schedule their stadium now than in September.
So would it make sense then if we approach this in trying to secure both scenarios? How about if, when we're trying to secure, if it's a normal year, we would secure sites for quarterfinals, right? We'd have 4 sites anyway. Can we not address those particular contest hosts and say, hey, if this falls through and we have to go to Plan B, would you be available to host a culminating event at your school? So by saying that, does that mean we need to search out ideally placed quarterfinals, legit quarterfinals areas that may end up being the final event to host this? Would that be maybe a route to go?
I think in choosing the quarterfinals events, that choosing the sites, that we got to think of them as potential state. I mean, if it couldn't host a state culminating event, then we don't need to consider it as a quarterfinals of venue.
In a normal year.
Right.
Thoughts? Anybody else?
So just looking at the numbers then, we're talking about 10 events, 5 West, 5 East. for quarterfinals, correct? Would we be, it's maybe not 10 locations, but 10 events. For Plan B, is that number the same, or are you thinking about, well, we need more sites so that people don't have to travel as far? That would be something that you really have to get a map out and look and see, okay, if this band is normally going to this site, or this is a site we're going to, is that an hour's drive? Is it more? And just kind of looking at a map really and gauging those distances to see, okay, we need another site here or there. Or are those sites chosen for those 10 events sufficient for a Plan B? If they are, then what you just said, approaching whoever wants to host those quarterfinal sites with also the option of it may be the culminating event site as well, would be sufficient.
When all of the classes had quarterfinals back before the hybrid way of classifying bands, all of the classes had the quarterfinals. We had 3 in the East and 3 in the West. They were chosen because they had a good field, ideally artificial surface, good audience capacity and vantage, good judge capacity and vantage, good parking, all these things in balance as best we could. These were the things that were in consideration when we were having to choose between, Tate's Creek and GRC, or this and that. Those things are still in place because it could rain like the devil on the 23rd of October. So those are considerations. You also, I think, you make a good point. Oldham County bands, Amanda Buckholz was having to drive a long way to get to Hopkinsville, but she was on that side of the class, I think it was the class 4A divide, when you divided the bands up. And so there was just as many here and just as many there. In order for her to get to Hoptown, it was a long way. And I made the mistake of putting her class first, and they had to get up at dark 30 to get there one year. I felt bad about it. I told her I'd never do that to her again, but that sort of thing. There's so many things to consider in order to try and make it as fair as possible for the bands. If Oldham County says you can only go an hour, well, she can't get to Lexington and she can't get to Hoptown. She can barely get to E-Town, and those kinds of, part of the concern is going to have to be, what are the districts saying? What are the rules? And then to some extent, maybe KBA, I mean, if I don't know, if Grant County said to their football team, you can only go an hour, they wouldn't be able to go to state tournament. And if they said that to their band, they wouldn't be able to go to state tournament. So, as Tom Stites said to one of his, I don't know, someone in the central office one time, how come we can only have field trips when it has the name ball in it? So, it puts us in a funny position if we have to reorient the world because some school district is being more conservative. It's not an easy situation, is it?
I think that, and I'm just going to throw this out here, based on our districts being willing to allow our basketball team to travel to Richmond for the All-A tournament. I'm thinking that by October, we will probably be able to go further on a bus, but what the school districts and the parents, Tim and I were talking about, even if the school district said we could, would the parents feel comfortable letting their kids stay in a hotel overnight with 3 other people that they're not related to? So instead of the amount of time traveled, it might be a distance where participating groups not have to stay.
Well, for quarterfinals, it's always been the idea that you wouldn't have to spend the night, that would be a cheaper weekend than going to state if you were on the wrong side of the state. And even quarterfinals, which is sometimes more than an hour from where you live, you can still get home and not have to spend the night. So I think if we ended up with Plan B, and even if they were similar to the kinds of quarterfinal sites we have now, and you were in Paducah, and it was more than an hour to Hoptown, let's say, if they were able to host, or up in northern Kentucky, and it was more than an hour to GRC or Madison Southern, if they were to decide to host again, then you'd still be able to get home. So that parental in the motel objection should be overcome for a Plan B situation. That objection might drive us to Plan B, because they don't want to go to Lexington for state. And so they say, so then Tim would be compelled to vote, stop it one weekend early so that we can claim a championship if possible, and not have to, drive to Lexington, which we're unwilling to do.
Whenever we do choose the quarterfinal sites, those groups that are, or the locations that do not get selected, I think it would be wise for us to go ahead and ask them to reserve those dates at their stadium, in case, we do have to move things around to Plan B. That way we do have, an option for multiple venues if we do have to go to that option.
We kind of did that last year, as a matter of fact, because it was a little up in the air. I remember having a conversation with Nate Clark. Hey, Nate, if we end up having a 5A West, would you think about? And he thought they might do that kind of thing. And I expect we would. It sounds very similar in a way to how it was last year.
Any other thoughts on how we might go about securing sites? Or
I think you just want to be careful about saying that whoever mentioned it, just be careful about mentioning that you only want to get places for quarterfinals that can host a culminating event, because I know, like, we've hosted quarterfinals plenty of times, but having 8 bands come in and out is a little bit different than hosting like a Lexington area championships. And so you may have a school that's able to host quarterfinals, but not able to do the big thing. So you may have to have, a couple backup plans in that.
thank you, Michael. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on this?
I just have something really quickly. So I think another thing you could look at considering is, if we have to look at this, I know there's a circuit up here our way over northern Ohio called MIPA that is doing like indoor events for Winter Guard, and all those good things. And they're doing things, and I'm kind of even thinking about some things that when we went to the event at Beechwood, I think there are ways that places could get creative if we had to in that scenario. For example, those indoor shows right now are basically only offering warm up, performance, and out the door. So you're not really there very long. They're not providing changing sites. They're not providing, indoor space for storage of equipment or cases or any of those kind of things. They're also doing performing blocks. So you would never have more than so many bands on campus. That's what Austin did for his show, to where you've only got 3 or 4 groups on the campus, and then you'd have to cycle them out. So it's not a prelims finals event kind of thing. It's just a longer day. It may have to start sooner, but you would be able to get more groups in and out of your campus without overloading a facility or overloading a stadium capacity of spectators. I think that's something that we might have to look at anyway. If they don't allow us at full capacity, we're probably going to have to do things like that in order to do that, even at a regular season contest. But it definitely be something that a smaller site that maybe couldn't hold 5A East quarterfinals event probably could if there's only 3 or 4 of them on campus at a time, and then they rotated them out or something like that. That would be something to look at.
Good food for thought there, Joe. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
It seems like Plan B would be, well, let me think. That what it's talking about is a lot of simultaneous sites that so you can split the state up to small enough pieces that it can all be done in a day. It is a prelims finals plan. I don't know how many bands would end up, I haven't done the math, how many bands would end up on average at each site. It could be divided a little differently because of the capacity of the site. Let's say we have a site. Let's say Michael hosts and his capacity is not as great as GRC and they're hosting. And so maybe we just can't send quite as many bands to the Bourbon County Plan B regional championship-esque, whatever you call it. That'd be hard to, but if we don't, it's just like every time we have a discussion about how we should do state and everything, we have to have venues. We can't do it in a church basement. We have to have venues. And if the venues we have a certain capacity, maybe that's something we ask them right off. If this thing goes to Plan B, how many bands can you take? Let's think about that, because we ask them that for sanctioned contest, you know. It's funny, you start unpeeling this onion, new problems arise and new solutions have to be found.
So John, kind of what Joe said a few minutes ago, cycling bands on and off campus. If you go to a BOA regional, it's not at a giant site. Even for prelims, you have to leave the parking lot. If you make finals, you come back, but everybody kind of has to have a plan on where to go, especially if you perform early enough in the day. You got to find a church where you can park your buses and feed your kids. So maybe we make that, one of the requirements is you can only have 4 or 5 bands on campus and you have to cycle them out. And you could even do that at finals. If anybody goes to Grand Nationals, they know at semifinals, you have to get in, you have to get out. So I think that's something we should look at.
The downside of that, of course, is, and I know there are some BOA events where after you perform, yes, you have to move your equipment. You have to get out of the area, but you can come back in and watch. There's been many times when I took the Adair band and they came back and watched some of the other bands perform. So there is that side of it too. I would love to be able to, I know we all would, for it to be an event where it's more than just performing. It is watching and observing and learning from others as well. And I think that's a big part of what we do here. So, while it's the cycling idea is maybe necessary in a, how do I say this? Not a last ditch effort, but to me, that's the Plan B to Plan B. I think we need to try to be able to accommodate as many patrons as we can and as many bands as we can, to not just, in other words, to avoid showing up, performing, and leaving. There's a piece of the puzzle missing there in my mind. So if we can do it in that manner, personally, I would prefer that. But I certainly understand the idea behind cycling and doing it in a safe way. Any other thoughts? So, John, we're about to the point where you're trying to secure some sites. So do we need to put some parameters on this right now? Do we need to just approach it the way you always have, and then maybe in a little byline there or a separate paragraph? By the way, if you feel like if we have to go to a plan B, could you handle, it can be an if, if this were the case, could you handle a larger event where this is a culminating event and you'd have more bands here?
Yeah, I think so. The way it's starting to evolve in my head as we discuss it is that we describe how we envision Plan B would go, maybe even include the Plan B to Plan B as a secondary. It could be like this, or it could be even like this. And could you do this? You see, and I don't think that they need to feel like they have to say yes in order to be selected, because we want the best quarterfinal sites for regular quarterfinals we can have, and those are hard to come by. It's just that if they say yes, we know we've got one in the bag, and if they say no, we need to search around a little bit more. But I think we describe it to them as best we can, and just say, how about this too? Could you do this? Would you put a check mark here or initial this if you would? And because we haven't done it before, because it's one of these once again making it up as we go kind of thing, I would feel a lot better by trying to construct that description, letting the marching band committee have a look at it and pick at it and wordsmith it before we put it out on the website or whatever and send it out in the email. Yeah, it's pretty soon. I mean, this needs to happen fairly quickly. Yes.
Well, so would you care, John, to maybe craft what you think might be an appropriate invitation for possible quarterfinals hosts, and then share it with us? And we can, in this day and age, it's really easy to, hey, let's meet next week and let's talk this over and pick it apart and then finalize it.
A lot of people, I'm one of them. A lot of people kind of think detail better when there's nobody else there, when it's just them. And what I think I would do likely is to put it in a Google Doc and send it out with the capacity for everyone to make suggestions, to edit at it. You wouldn't actually edit it. You would make a suggestion, which would then show up, how they do. And then I could go through and look at that and try to make it all work. And we might or might not need to get together and talk about it, honestly.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get the ball rolling on that then. Seems like every time we have a meeting, John, we pile a little bit more work on you. So, but you're so good at it. It's one of those things that if you weren't so darn good at it, we wouldn't have to be calling on you for this.
It's how it works, I'm afraid.
That's why you get paid the big bucks, right?
That's right.
Okay. I just jotted down here, as far as and this is again Plan B, as far as the possible format, do we need to discuss, well, we talked about a prelims and finals format. Do we want to discuss how many finalists we would take and maybe the awards that would be involved? We kind of touched on it briefly before, just in general, but do we want to get into a little bit more detail about, we don't know how many we're going to have in the prelims of each site. It could be in one place, as John alluded to, could have a handful, and others we might have several.
So do we want to do it perhaps on a percentage basis based on the number of bands that participate?
Maybe.
My thought would be to just say up to 12 finalists.
Well, throughout the state? So 6 aside?
No,
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 he's not talking about,
12 at each site.
Well,
he's
so
talking
that,
the Plan B plan, not the regional quarterfinals plan.
And so if there were fewer than 12 that participated in the prelims, you take everybody again. Right?
Jim, when you asked that question, when I kind of thought of this idea, the BOA concept popped in my mind. When you're talking about awards, you name your regional class champion and prelims, and you can do caption awards in each class, just like you do at a regular contest, first, second, third place, and then the top 12 overall. And if a band isn't in the top 12, but they won their class, they perform an exhibition. So we just, and it's not BOA only that does that. That's how most of us operate our regular season contests. If we have a selective finals where not everybody makes it, so I don't think we're reinventing the wheel with that, but that's kind of what I envisioned when it kind of popped in my head.
Sure.
But here's the thing, being involved with a smaller band. I mean, we all know times that smaller bands, you go on and your number stays lower because number one, you're at the beginning, and number two, the bigger bands sometimes get inflated scores, not all the time. With BOA, even though it's by class, as far as the judges are concerned, it's still an open competition. And that's not what we have at our state level so much. We don't consider it to be an open competition like that. I mean, you're talking about the quality of judges at a BOA competition compared to the judges that we would have to have at 10 sites rather than one site.
What prevents from mixing up the bands like they do at a BOA regional? Do we have to do all 1A bands go between noon and 2 o'clock, and then 2A, 3A, 4A? I mean, if we're making this up from scrap, why can't we do it based on their travel distance, or just a random draw where they're all mixed in together? And you don't even, I mean, at a BOA event, they don't even publish what class each band is in. So every judge is judging it. They're not comparing, this band to this band. They're comparing this band to every band. Does that make sense? I think that's kind of how BOA tries to get around that, is that they mix everything up a little bit more.
I agree, but then I will also go back to the fact that there's not as many judges spread out in one area at one time, and those judges have been trained. When we do our quarterfinals, we sometimes, because we've got so many sites, sometimes don't have that same quality of judging as we would have at a BOA competition. I'm trying to say this nicely, guys.
No, I understand that. I don't think we would need to do 10 sites. I don't think that I think that would put too much pressure on George to try to fill 10 panels. I mean, if you had 4 or 5 regions around the state, I mean, I think that's a lot more manageable. That's a lot more like what he does already.
Yeah, that was my thoughts about it too. Like, we're not going to have one for each class on every side of the state. It's just going to be regional areas.
And George, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know how many other states are planning on going back like we are. I mean, do we have as much of a pick of judges as we usually do? Is it more? Is it less? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, it's a little hard to tell because everything's coming out late. As far as, like, I just got a judging opportunity offered yesterday. So I think states are moving slowly to what they think will be normal. So, it's the problem that we have with our 2 weekends is those are the most popular 2 weekends of the season, because many of the states follow the same calendar year that we do with marching band.
Well,
I do
and
think, I'm sorry, go ahead,
I was going to
Austin.
say, I mean, if the earlier and the quicker we can be on this, the earlier he can start getting the top quality people. Wouldn't
He
that make
can,
sense?
he can sure try.
Yeah.
One thing is we haven't made the decision to go to something where we need more than the usual, 6, 12, 24 judges, I think, for quarterfinals nowadays. And of course, what you're asking someone to do is to commit to save the date for a weekend where we haven't decided to do it that way yet. It is an awkward circumstance. That said, what is occurring to me is it really complicates the matter to, and I understand why. I understand that it is sort of part of it. It complicates the matter to say that we're going to second guess the judges in the planning stage. We need to plan what the thing about plan B is. It's the best we can do if the circumstances are limiting. And then we got to put 4 people in the press box and 2 on the field in today's individual judge kind of thing. And we've got to put the best people we can get. And that's what we always do. And if the quality is lower because we're dipping deeper into the pool and the wrong band gets 5th place and they should have gotten 4th place, usually the right band wins, but sometimes it's down in the middle that judges who aren't as capable, mix things up. We got to do the best we can. So what we have to do is figure out what's the most practical, I think. What can we do if we have to go to something like this? And then populating the judging is we just do our best.
I'll just say one last thing. I really think, we don't need to come at this and look at everything that can go wrong. We need to come from it from a perspective of this is plan B. How are we going to make plan B work? Because I feel like we hold ourselves back a lot by exploring all of the possible quarries that we may encounter along the way. And it's great to, plan ahead and have your head up on things, but we also can't go into things expecting the worst. And that's what we've been doing for over a year. And so almost over a year. And we've got to get away from that mentality and just try to get something going, because if we don't and somehow we blow it and we don't have anything, we might as well just hand out like tennis rackets and basketballs to our kids because they're not coming back. And I don't want to be so aggressive, but I hate, the idea that we're not going to try and get everything going right from the start. And so I think that we should just move forward with this with a positive look on it, and let's just figure it out. It's like Austin's saying, it's brand new. We can make it whatever we want. We're not held by any rules. And so if we have to do this, then we can make it whatever we want to make it work.
Thank you, Michael. Any more thoughts on the the format of the prelims? I know the idea has been thrown around about mixing up the classes as opposed to keeping within your class for prelims. Any more thoughts on that? This is not something we have to decide, but just your thoughts.
Yeah, if I could jump in for just a second here, I know that the second module for the judge training was intended to get going, and Dr. Strobel, you and I have talked about that some, and I'll just be honest and say that a lot of it's just been put on hold with everything that's happened, and but I had a plan for what the second module was going to look like. Having said that, considering the circumstances and considering what we'll be coming back to next year, maybe some of these things can be more of the focus of the training instead of other things. So, as far as the judge side that you all are discussing, the mixing bands and how a judges, maybe that becomes if we decide to go that route, maybe that becomes the focus of the judge training modules on how to deal with that and how to work under those kind of circumstances. Just not specifically here, but just in general, if there are things that we need to do to, like I said, to Michael said, to get to make it work from the judge side, maybe we can add that. And George, you can help me. What kind of things do you think that the judges for next year would need to know? So I think we can make the judge training side of things work and very well.
Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts on the prelim format in terms of mixing classes versus staying within class? Any other thoughts on that? Okay.
I'm sorry, something just flashed through my head. If we determine early on that the 5A bands are not going to be having quarterfinals because there aren't enough of them, and then we move state to the weekend before state, how does that affect the bands, the larger bands in the larger schools? What's their circumstance? Because that's not a weekend that we had originally said would be a week. So I guess maybe that, as I process it, maybe that just means that we've just got to make it pretty obvious when people sign up for state that if we go to plan B, everybody, that's the end of your season. That I guess maybe that's the only thing, is we just have to be real clear about it, because it's a little different problem for them than it is for other people.
Yeah, I think it falls along the same process of acquiring quarterfinal sites. We need to, in that information letter, oh, by the way, 5A bands, there's a chance if we go to plan B, you need to be ready to go for your culminating event to be on October 23rd rather than October 30th. Just, it's in the big picture. In the big picture, it's a minor detail that if I were a competing band director and I was in 5A, I would deal with that. I would try to make it work for my band. Just needs to be understood and clear up front. Anything else?
Tim, I have a couple of things, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I think one of the things, this could be probably part of your subcommittee, or it might be something different. I think that it's going to be the same for the band council, just with a different lens, that we need to continuously be gathering data from our constituents. So at least from, I get a little bit more, I guess, in my chair than I normally would. But right now, obviously, I know a lot of folks are getting signups for next year's classes, and they're taking hits to their numbers, both in retention and recruitment. It's systemic, obviously, all the way down to the middle school, all the way through. I know that folks are really concerned about finances and where they are with that. And I know some folks are, looking at it from that in terms of the competitive things. We may be losing bands competitively altogether at the small level. We may be losing bands to other circuits if they're, looking at it from the band size versus school size, all that other kind of stuff. So I think we need to, be sending out stuff. Probably, this is probably too soon right now. People probably don't know, but like as we get to the end of the school year and throughout the summer, I think that'll help guide the committee on some decisions, because I feel like the other part of that is, I think even if we are able to do everything competitively that we would normally do in terms of kind of like what David Starnes was talking about, even if we have a full state championships, full circuit, everything, we're going to have to make some modifications, I think, to how we do things, whether that's, some of the stuff we were considering before about show timing and show limits and what the beginning of the season looks like versus the end. Anything related to, like you said, to what Brian was talking about with the judges training about what bands are really like right now. I know at least at Ryle, we've been able to be in person a little bit more than some of the bigger districts, but not as much as some of the smaller ones. And we're easily, it seems like a year behind where we should be. We're playing a grade level to a grade and a half level lower on everything that we're trying to do. And I don't think that's going to magically change in the summer. So I think things like that, obviously we're looking at financial things of, do we spend as much money on all of the visual things that everyone's used to seeing on the show, or do we spend it on instruction? We're gonna have to pick and choose. I think a lot of bands are in those similar boats. So I think there's probably need to be some things for that the band directors are going to be asking about, just as much as what does it look like, but how's it going to be going about, and just getting some information on where bands are, because I was a little surprised. Even my own district, I kind of just started talking to some folks up here, and they're already doing things like combining 7th and 8th grade bands together, taking a 6th grade band and putting it from a woodwind brass class to one 6th grade band, taking 2 high school bands and combining them to one and so forth. That's already happening after, just this little bit of time. So I could see that being something that we need to know, because it might inform some of your guys' decisions. Like we were talking about with 5A and 4A. I mean, in 3A and 2A, 1A, like how many bands do we actually have that we feel like are going to be back next year competing? Is it more or less the same? And then kind of go from there. I think that'll help a lot. So just trying to get that information, I guess, the end of the school year and in the summer as well.
Thank you, Joe. Good thoughts there. And I think it would be wise if we can keep tabs on. And so that might be in the form of maybe as we get closer to the end of the school year, maybe April, maybe sometime after our April meeting, sending out a survey to our constituents that gives us a better picture of what our numbers are, how many are going to be involved next fall. I would think we'd have a better grasp on it by then. Not a complete grasp, but a better one. So I think that's badly needed. I think it would be very helpful.
I guess this is tied into this as well. I guess my only fear with this, and I know this is kind of where we've all been talking about this, like because I've talked to some of the younger band directors in our district as well. And I think their thought right now is that kind of the old mentality of how I say this, they're looking at how do they get back to normal. And, that means either rehearsing a lot more, or getting a bunch of younger kids in to artificially get your numbers up and so forth like that. I think we need to take this opportunity to get some data and get some folks some idea of, I'm trying to be realistic with this, and that it's, it's not going to be next October, your band's going to look like it did in 2019. Like, I mean, there may be a few places where that's the case, but I mean, like you said, for our districts that have been virtual for this long, I mean, gosh, I mean, how is that possible? And then same thing from the visual side, I guess, trying to figure out ways to encourage folks that even if they're not able to spend money on whatever, it's custom uniforms and tops and props and all those other things, that the activity still merited and they still have a chance to be competitively successful, that we kind of get back to, we have to be really big advocates, I think, right now, because the other big thing you guys keep talking about, which is, I'm 100% with you. I want to have a state championships like we normally would, but the reality of it is a lot different than the sporting events. So how much do the football teams mingle at state championships with anyone else? Whether it's spectators or fan or other bands, they don't. They come, like basically what Tim was saying is the difference of what we do. They don't watch other groups. They go, they play and they leave. Right now in our gyms, I'm sure it's the same thing if they're having basketball games. I mean, they're at least at Ryle, they're allowed 2 spectators per player. So I mean, the things versus what we do, the scale and the scope of those things is so different. I think we're going to have to really do our best to kind of be prepared for some of those questions that may come our way from the admin, because as much as we wanted to say that, football's able to do this, basketball is able to do this, why aren't we? Well, I mean, I'm having a band concert next week, which is awesome. I'm really excited about it. We haven't had one since December, but we're following all the guidelines that they're having to do, and it's difficult to do this way, with only letting 1 or 2 people come in because it's a capacity in the gym. We're only allowing 1 spectator per student, because we take up, we're bigger than the basketball teams. And obviously, they're not allowed to be there, but so many times before that, they have to leave immediately after. They can't see the other bands. They can't do any of those other things. So I know that we hope that it'll be better in the fall, and I think it will be, but how much better? Is it going to be exactly back to normal? Or I think we need to be ready for answering some of those questions that are going to come our way from the admin side on those events. and be prepared, I guess, like Austin and Mike was saying, just to be flexible. No matter what happens, we're going to do it. We just have to be able to roll with whatever they send our way.
Hey, Joe, if I can kind of jump off of what you're talking about here, I'm pretty involved on the drum corps side for this upcoming summer. And I can tell you on that side, I mean, that's the next big event that's, that we all kind of in the marching arts type thing. And, they don't even really know what they're doing yet. They've put some publicity out saying that they're doing this, but there's still a lot of back and forth from drum corps what they're going to do. I mean, as many of you all know, there's a couple of our big ones that they're not even coming out. There's a couple other big ones that they're not going to Indianapolis. They're just going to do a virtual recording of their show, and that's going to be sent to Flow Marching. There are others that are coming, but DCI has kind of already said what the Indianapolis event is going to look like. They defined that. And then, so all the drum corps are, I guess what they stopped worrying about is the problems that it's going to cause for this drum corps or that drum corps or this. They find what the experience is going to look like at championships in Indianapolis. And then so all the drum corps we're changing our approach. The show designs are different right now, and the length of time is different. And I guess the big takeaway I get from that is, number one, from a planning standpoint, it's March and we're supposed to go to Indianapolis in August. And so all of those details aren't in place yet. So maybe we should worry a little less about that. All of our details aren't in place right now. But second of all, they have defined what the experience is going to look like. And all the member groups that want to participate in that are having to kind of redefine what they're going to look like and what they're going to bring to the big championship event. And I just give that example because that is the next big event, and so many of us kind of model ourselves after what's happening on that level, whether we should or not. I mean, we do kind of do that. So and I think that is connected also, Joe, to some of the things that you're talking about here.
As compared with drum corps, of course, we have an advantage in that our bands don't go on tour and eat and sleep and bathe and and travel on buses for hours and hours at a time, to where if there were an infection in the corps, it would probably spread without being able to help it. As compared with that, Kentucky marching bands, it's generally a short trip and you don't spend the night and that sort of thing. And the thing is too, as compared with the concert events where there's these huge restrictions, or basketball games, our deal is entirely outside. I mean, our marching band thing, once you get off your bus, you're outside, and it would be possible, certainly, for band directors to keep their kids together and not mix with others if that were going to be a concern for parents and administrators. I think we got a lot in our favor since it is outdoors, since there is the ability to control the mingling factor. I'm picturing, let's say we're at UK, I can see a band coming in the gate, and they're not with any other band, and they do their thing, and then they go off, and bands follow each other, and they don't have to mix. So I'll bet we're okay, but we need to be ready in case there are concerns.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put on the red alarms here. I just, some of the things that you talked about there with, like in the drum corps world, I mean, we're already talking about making these pods of isolation. Like this drum corps is completely isolated. They walk into a show, they walk out of the show. There's no more of all that. Some of the things that you're talking about there. So I think I agree with you, Dr. Sturdy. I mean, I think we are going to be in much better shape. We're going to have a much better handle on what's happening. But
Okay. Any other input or thoughts? I really have nothing else on my agenda as far as covering what we have so far today. Anything beyond that, I have nothing. Is there anything else that anybody would like to share?
Hey guys, when are you anticipating doing the sanctioning
of local events? Is that going to be next month, or when's that going to occur?
Yeah, that's typically done at the April. Well, I guess it's always been done at the April meeting. And
Okay.
so I've got to get now that I know my allowable weeks, at least I think I know my allowable weeks. You know, we don't have a contract, but that application needs to be distributed and give local host an opportunity to get those applications in. And it's toward the end of the month of March that I create the map. Alan, you've seen the map before, and
Oh, yeah.
and people say, "Oh, I don't want to be on that weekend because there's 15 contests that weekend. I think I'd like to be," and they do that little bit of that mixing and matching. So by the time it gets to the marching band committee in April anymore, those kinds of conflicts have typically been worked out, even to the point he's going in the morning, I'm going in the afternoon, and we're good with being in the same town with two contests type of thing. But that would be in middle of April, which we're going to talk about next, I think, when we would actually take a motion on sanctioning the contest that it applied.
Cool. I feel a lot like Joe, and he stated it so well. You know, a lot of us feel that way as band directors. You know, I see this as I'm optimistic and hopeful, and I'm ready to teach kids more than virtually. I think it's going to take us 5 years to get back to a Madisonville band of 120 that can play on grade 4+ level. You know, I see it as a 5, and that's the way I'm looking at it. This is part of a 5-year plan, you know, that what we're doing right now. And number one thing in the plan is get the kids together safely and teach them and give them something to do, or we're going to lose them to tennis. And we've lost some. You know, I anticipate the Maroon Band will be, Randy and I anticipate the Maroon Band at 80, you know, next year. You know, and we've been 120 since before I came, you know, and even a little bit bigger when there was not as many schools in the county. So, but still, it's going to be a fun 80 to teach, you know, and then that infectious drive that the kids have and share they'll go out and recruit their friends, you know, and I see it as a 5-year plan, but I'm ready and eager to get started on it. And not just the marching band, you know, the whole thing. We've got after school jazz bands rolling, and we now have the A's and B's combined 4 days a week. And the remote kids are still at home, of course, and there's a few of those, but most of our kids wanted to come back. Now I've got to talk our school system into going 5 days a week. I'm not sure why we take Wednesday off. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. You know, they say it's for deep cleaning. Nothing's getting deep cleaned in our school, you know. But I appreciate everybody's input, and I think we planned for the best, and we plan to teach kids, you know, and give them the best experience we can. And this committee needs to be flexible with the rule book, you know, because some groups are going to be like us. We're going to focus on music making and not visual stuff because we don't have the money. We need to hire teachers that want to teach kids, and that's where we're going to put the emphasis of our dollars. And everybody needs to think about what they're going to do best for kids. And so this committee needs to be flexible with the rule book when it comes to that. But we do need to plan events.
Thank you, Alan. Any other items of business or discussion? Okay, we probably do need to come up with a date for our sanctioning meeting in April.
I'm suspecting that we're going to want to be on a Saturday because it frees people up since people are teaching. And what I've done previously is I've avoided KMEA assessment events as best I could, and tried to but this year I don't think we're going to be having. We might have one solo and ensemble I hear about that's still kind of left with Hope down in the Bowling Green area, and I'm not sure what day. I'm not even sure what day Michael Wicks is planning to do that. Do you know, David Graham, what day that is the thought is?
Looking now. April 24th.
Uh-huh. So the other thing to worry about, Tim, I think, is when people's spring breaks are, and try to keep from being, if the spring breaks are early in April and we were anywhere close to uniform on that, maybe we would go a little bit later and pick a different day later on.
I know most of them in our area are during the first 2 full weeks of April.
Is there anybody here whose spring break is later than the first 2 weeks of either of the first 2 weeks of April? Do you know? It's all like that. So,
John, I will say that there's the potential that the first district solo and ensemble could be April 17th.
mhm.
And-
In-person event.
Yeah, and then the 24th is the next one, and there's not a 31st of April.
No, there's not this year.
Could we meet on a Sunday afternoon, perhaps?
That could free things up a little bit. It would be okay with me. If it's the first, if we're talking the first 2 full weeks of April as being spring break land, that means that some people might still be they're on the way back from the beach or something on the 17th of April. So that would be the 18th or the 25th in order to avoid that kind of thing. Anybody have thoughts?
Do it as early as you can, but do it correctly. Those are my thoughts.
As early in the month as you can?
Yes, or you can push it into March if it doesn't mess up the horse trading of the weekends.
Yeah, that's a little, I don't think we could be ready. I think you hit on the
Yeah,
problem
right.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we shoot for Sunday, April 25th? Is that going to be a problem for the committee members? If we had it on a Sunday afternoon, the 25th of April? Anybody have a problem with that? Why don't we set that up then? So April 25th.
What time? 2 Eastern time, 1 Central time. Is that good? What are you saying,
Fine
Beth?
with that.
I'm saying 3 Eastern time, 2 Central time. So some people, the worship service might go until 12:30, et cetera and so forth. Sunday dinner with the fam, you know.
You got to tell the preacher I got a meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
April 25th, it's a Sunday, 3 o'clock Eastern time. Everybody okay with that?
Just hope it's not a pretty day.
Yeah.
Zoom outside.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Hearing none. Is there a motion that we adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Michael Stone, have a second?
Second.
Beth
Second.
seconds. Any opposed? All right. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your Saturday to be here. And we look forward to seeing you all again in April. Take care.
Thank you all. See you at
Bye.
1, Joe. David.